Oh. Oh my goodness. Everyone, ladies, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We're back with Chasing Clarity Health and Fitness Podcast. Myself, Jeff Black, Brandon DeCruz. Today we have episode 34, Reverse Dieting to Stay Lifestyle Lean and Reduce the Post-Diet Rebound Diet Rate. And basically like how people like fail at that. But first, as always, actually before that, PEC7 Tampa, theexcellencecartel.com. Ladies and gentlemen, we only have 50 seats. And we got a few that are already starting to get taken up. I know everybody waits the last minute. We've been gracious before to let people in at the last minute, but it can't fly for this one. So if you guys are on the fence, go ahead and get your tickets. But the Brandon, you're presenting on blood glucose management and optimization, correct?
Yep, optimizing insulin sensitivity and blood glucose management
Yeah.
for optimizing body composition and health outcomes.
Yeah, it'll be badass, man. You got a host of other great ones on there. Be sure to check out the website, the Excellence Cartel. We talk about a little bit more there. Brandon's gracious and lets me share about this since we both present on it. Even though this is our podcast, we collectively like to support all the other coaches in the industry. So want to let you guys know that. So if your coach are interested, it's January 27th, 28th in Tampa. It'll be a good time. I'm sure you guys will probably see me in a Speedo at the pool that time of the year. It'd be great. I'll make sure I shave my back. But in the meantime, Brandon, dude, how was your last 7 days, bro? How's everything been?
Man, my last 7 days have been great, my man. Honestly, we got to think about it. It was just the holiday weekend, so we have just passed Thanksgiving, which is one of my favorite times of the year. This year, we started a new tradition, as I was mentioning to you last week, in my household, where essentially my girl and my mom have started to do Thanksgiving dinner together. So they did, the turkey together, everything together, which was really nice to see, man. Yeah, my mom, I pretty much was raised just by my mother, so this was an occasion that I always saw her do, and it always means a lot to me. And so it was great to see my girl partake in it with her and to create like a new, tradition that we can carry on in the future. And it was a great success. They made an incredible dinner. So kudos to them. And then this past week was also the last week of my post-diet recovery phase, as I mentioned last week. And so I did a deload so that I could allocate a little bit more time to my friends and family and really enjoy the holiday. And I also took a day off from work. And so I was really able to kick back, relax, get a great amount of, quality time, but also, rest and relaxation, got caught up on some sleep, was really able to restore myself because I have a busy couple of weeks coming up, both with school, with business. And then also, it is the holiday season. So there's a lot of things to do in between, what I mean? All these, getting presents and preparing for holidays and parties and this, that, and the other. And so then yesterday, I officially started a building phase. So with that, I started a new training cycle where I'm actually going to be experimenting with every day full body training. And so it's going to be
Every
to
day, full
increase.
body?
Yeah, so I'm going to increase my frequency to 5 to 6 times per week per body part. And I'm really doing that to so I can accumulate more effective volume throughout the course of the week without getting into like the area of junk volume, because I do need to start reaccumulating volume. That's how I've grown best in the past. And when I find that, we see this in the literature, but I also find from just a subjective standpoint that when I get past a certain amount of volume, say 8 to 10 sets per body part per session, I just, my performance drops off, my reps per set drops off, my perceived recovery drops off, as well as my perceived effort in that session in and of itself. So my recovery takes a hit, my performance takes a hit. So I'm really going to be experimenting with a little bit lower volume per session, but just doing more sessions per week to be able to accumulate that volume. So, it's an experiment. I did this years ago. It was very fruitful, but I'm obviously in a different phase of my life. And I'm also doing this so that, my sessions are a little bit more truncated, meaning that they're not as long as they generally would be. There was a time in my life when I was bodybuilding and I was spending 90 minutes to 2 hours in the gym every single day. I really just don't have that time to allocate now. So I really try to get in, get out, and be as effective and efficient as possible. And I think that, that's really allowed me to relate more to my lifestyle clients who they're not bodybuilders, they're not competitors, they're not gym owners. And so with a lot of those clients, it is about getting most bang for your buck in terms of the time that they have each and every day to train, and really being able to get the most out of every session that they're able to allocate or commit to the gym. So that's really the area or the direction that I've went in with my own training. But how was your week, my man?
Man, it was really good. Completely unplugged, had a great Thanksgiving. Oldest did not end up making it up. So
Sorry to
had
hear
a
that.
great it's all good, man. Like, that's just part of what him getting to that age and then just all that. It's good for him. He'll learn as he gets older. I still love him. It doesn't change anything like that, but it's just he'll learn that communication lesson. You know what I mean? It'll be good for him. Took off to the aquarium Friday, dropped a little extra LSD than I should have on a microdose, and just had a great time. Really chillaxed. Had a few old fashions, drove back, and just had a great time, man. It was really nice. It normally takes 90 minutes to get from Nashville to Chattanooga, and I came back in 70 in my Supra.
Dear Lord.
Me and
Now
yeah,
let me
me and
ask you, was Keegan with you?
no.
Okay.
So
I'm thinking aquarium, I'm thinking Keegan, and then LSD, I'm like, wow, that's quite a mix.
yeah, no, like I wouldn't do that one. So not yeah, no. Not like the extra microdosing and so forth. Don't want to say anything over there that makes me sound like too shitty of a parent, right? You know what I mean? So but with that being said, it was really good. It was fun driving the Supra because the drive to Chattanooga is very windy in the mountains and so forth and so forth. So it was really cool. Like I had a great time. I really got to play with my car and open it up and just had a good weekend. My Cowboys won. And otherwise business is good. I got no complaints. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to get the inquiries getting ready for next year, trying to decide if I want to go up on my rates or not. Things like that. I think you're probably in the same boat. Do you go up a little bit? Do you hold? It's tough to say, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. I actually just filled one of my last spots this morning, but I received a ton of inquiries actually last week. Coincidentally, that you're bringing it up now, for the new year. So I have a lot of people that are inquiring, and I generally, give a lead time, and I also put people on a wait list. So if anyone's interested, feel free to reach out to me, and I will let each and everyone that is on my wait list currently and who listens to the podcast know when I have openings, as well as anyone that reaches out from this moment forward. I will be keeping you guys posted through an email thread based on my openings, and then we can do a consultation and see where you're at and see what we could work on moving forward. But there are a lot of people that are interested in, obviously setting up for the new year. But I really do encourage people. It was before Thanksgiving. I got a bunch of inquiries Monday through Wednesday, and I really thought to myself, hey, that's actually, a little bit more advanced than I'm used to. I'm used to right around Christmas, people are coming in, and they're reaching out like, hey, I want to start in like 2 weeks. But I really find that to be a little bit more of an improvement or progress. And the standpoint of a lot of people, they're preparing a little bit further in advance. Like a lot of the emails and the conversations that I had in the beginning of last week centered around the fact that they're going to be watching themselves throughout this holiday season. They don't want to gain, some of this was spurred by the podcast that we had on holiday weight gain and, avoiding that weight regain or that weight gain that is so common amongst this time of year. But I was really, I had a lot of great conversations with people that they were really going to be trying to cement a lot of the positive habits and behaviors that they've gotten to so far. And then they want to make improvements going forward into the new year. So for anyone that's in that position, I encourage you, there is nothing that says that you have to wait to the new year to make a New Year's resolution or to get started on a resolution. The time is now. So if you are someone that you have goals, there's no reason to hold off to tomorrow what you can start on today. And maybe it's not the most optimal time of the year because it is the holidays, but even getting your foot in the door and starting some of these habit modifications, these behavior modifications, a lot of these things can set you up for greater success in the new year rather than waiting till January 1st and kind of being behind the eight ball.
As a gym owner, I can say like everyone will be like, oh my God, it's gonna be like New Year's rush. And I'm like, really, that's kind of like a myth. Like what you see is a lot of people will go back to the gym who were already gym members who fell off somewhere between September, October, November. We maybe do for an average, we sell for our gym probably about 60 memberships a month. And we might spike to 70, 75.
Interesting.
And then in April, you'll see like about those extra 15 fall off and cancel. But consistently it goes up and up and up every year, but you don't really see the spike that most people say that's there, in all honesty.
Now, do you find that just specifically within your gym? Because keep in mind, my previous career, I worked with hundreds of gym owners, and I also predominantly in the Northeast. And I will tell you that a lot of the friends that I have within this industry that own gyms, they do see a large spike in January, and it could be due to the fact that these are more corporate gyms. I have friends that own retros or Planet Fitnesses or small chain gyms. It's not really like a hardcore atmosphere like yours is. And it's not also, I'm going to be honest with you, and no slight on there, it's not really a family atmosphere. It's not really a culture as you've built. So I almost feel like you would have less of a recidivism rate or people falling off than most people. And so you might not see as much of an uptick, but you probably see greater maintenance and consistency of your memberships than most gyms do on the average.
That's a good question. So when I did work the corporate gyms, we would see those outrageous Januaries, right?
Mhm.
But those were gyms that were charging 19, 20, $30 a month. I charge like 70. So for us, like, you know, in 18 months, we've grown 100% at the $70 price range. So I just think I would rather, I don't know, it doesn't really, I think maybe in the corporate models it holds true, but I think what I'm trying to allude to more often in this conversation is you have a lot of coaches who are listening who like bank on January being an explosive month. And I'm like, not really true, because a lot of the groundwork for January should be done in December, in November, in October. You know, those
I would
are
argue, honestly, I see a higher spike for myself as a coach in September and October. It's before the holiday season.
so those are the ones, in my opinion, those are the clients who will actually do the best. You know, because they're the ones who are like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and get on it. I'm going to go ahead and get this going. And they're the ones who generally have the most success, right? Because they're serious about starting the holidays. Like we talked about what on our last podcast, the people gained an average of 10 pounds throughout the holiday, roughly. And then they released, I think I saw someone say that millennials now they've done since the COVID lockdowns began, that millennial groups have gained over 50 pounds. And I can see that like in my gym, like we're getting more and more men. I don't know about you for clients. I get tons of guys now in their 30s who have like low T, like that of like a 70-year-old man or some shit. I'm like, well, no wonder you feel like crap. But
yeah, honestly, I've seen, and we say this because there is a predisposition that we see in the literature, even by like Travison and stuff, that do testing on testosterone levels, that the average testosterone level of a male in their 30s is that of their grandfathers from a few generations ago. So we do see a decline decade by decade in testosterone levels in males, but then we also are seeing a higher prevalence of women going into menopause earlier and earlier. So generally, women, the average age for menopause is between 50 and 51, but we're seeing a lot of women in their early 40s. And I'm not sure if you're encountering that, but I am. I'm having a lot of women that are coming to me with perimenopausal symptoms and a lot of the side effects of menopause, being earlier in life. And luckily they're getting ahead of it. They're looking at hormone replacement therapy, or they're looking at coaching, or they're looking at nutritional interventions. So they're getting ahead of the curve, but still there's a lot of hormonal shifts within our generation due to lack of food quality, a big shifting in our lifestyle, sedentariness. There's so many factors that come into consideration that we are really becoming, in generality, we are becoming much more unhealthy. Like there was a recent study that came out, I believe in March, that showed that between 6 to 8%, only 6 to 8% of the population is what is considered metabolically healthy. And how they determined that was by the criteria for metabolic syndrome, meaning having people that were considered metabolically healthy were someone that had a fasted blood glucose under 100 milligrams per deciliter, triglycerides under 150. I think total cholesterol under 200. These weren't like great, metrics. These weren't optimal blood metrics. And so really, if we looked at who's optimal, who's in the ranges that we would use from like a functional nutrition range, that might be 2%, 1% of the country. And so, people are in a much worse position from a health and body composition perspective than they've ever been. And so that's really where the utility of coaching comes in. People that are educated and willing to help others and really trying to help optimize not only their body composition, but their health, their lifestyle, and everything else, so they can navigate a lot of the challenges and struggles that many in our generation and our population are encountering.
I personally think you are going to see our industry explode, but here's where I think coaches have to pivot. So if you're a coach and you're listening and you think it's to know this high level shit, like, oh my God, what about like GI map test and blood work? I've got some news for you. 95% of the fucking people you encounter can't afford that shit. And then 97% of them are already leery about supplements because they don't want to quote unquote take a pill every day. So you have to really double down on the basics, which is what we hammer home on this podcast. And this is coming from someone that with the Excellence Cartel, when Jason, Jeff, and I did that, we kind of ushered in that functional nutritional side of things, like really talking like in depth, had a lot of guests, so forth. And I can tell you that that's sexy and all that stuff, but as a person who's got 100 people on a client roster, I can tell you that's 5 to 10% of my client base. The other 80, 90, 95, I spend a lot of time working with on the basics. That's why, like, for videos I'm working on shooting is actually like weighing out a bowl of cereal, like 3 servings, showing people what that looks like, and then like how much sugars and fruit, because so many people think fruit makes them fat, and then they go over there and eat the cereal because they're just uneducated. And I think that that's where coaches can, like, this in our industry is not going anywhere. If anything, you're a coach and you're listening, you should be able to feast in these next 20 plus years. The population is getting sicker. It's just a matter of you being able to humble yourself and say, like, I might know it all, but I need to know what these people need to know to be successful. And that is a huge component of business. And number 2, I get asked all the time why I don't do mentorships. That's part of the reason why, because I don't offer anything sexy when it comes to building a business. I don't offer anything sexy when it comes to helping you troubleshoot your clients. And that's why I don't do it. So I think our industry is in for a big shock in the next few years. That's just my personal 2 cents on the whole thing. I think it's going to be shifted a lot, and I'll be interested to see who really breaks through. I'll put it to you like that.
Excited. I'll be excited to be along the journey, my friend, because I'm always looking to level up, enhance my education, really broaden my ability to not only learn things, learn new skills, but also apply those skills. So I think that people that are open-minded, they're critical thinkers, are really going to thrive in this environment. And those who are not, that are cookie cutter, that are unwilling to change or be open-minded to new strategies and to new clienteles, and to getting away from a niche of just working with 35-year-old women that have 3 kids and this predisposition, they're going to unfortunately fall by the wayside, because there's only so many clients, and really we should be looking to help as many people as possible. That is the goal of coaching, and that's why I will not niche myself.
All right, so think about this. You brought up a great point. Then let's get into the topic. Critical thinking, right? If you could critically think all day, but if you can't convey that to the client that you're trying to work with, your critical thinking skills don't matter. And that's where I look at this industry. When I see some of these posts, I'm like, I can read it, and I'm like, that copy is written at such a high level that you just missed 80% of your consumers at that point. Like it or not, people read at a 3rd or 4th grade level. And I've learned that from writing a book. Like, there are words I had to shift out. I'm like, the fuck you mean I got to change the word tantalizing? People know it. And they're like, no, they don't. And I'm like, oh, all right. You know what I mean? So I've had some eye-opening stuff, and then being lucky to have Stephen Pressfield as my mentor. It's really about what you can convey to people to be able to get them to buy in and chew on. And I think that that's where the business coaching and the mentorships is drastically failing people in our industry, in my personal opinion. It should be more you're a consultant is what I think. But that's just me. Save it for another day. Now, that being said, let's get into this topic. So we've had a lot of questions, basically to kind of like tease out a little bit more about like why reverse dieting is even important and how you can utilize it to stay lean. I think Brandon's been depicting that very well with his post photo shoot recovery that you've been posting, on your IG and your feed. And today we really wanted to kind of dive into that. So the first topic we want to talk about is, what is the definition of a reverse diet and what is the intention of using it? And I'll be honest with you, man, like when you talk to clients, and you and I both know this now, especially when you start working with gym pop people, they're like, what do you mean I'm going to raise my food? I'm like, yeah, we're going to walk your food. Like their mind is completely blown. You know what I mean? I posted one this morning where I was talking to this woman, a female client of mine. I said, well, you've been doing it this way for 4 months, for like 8 years or some obscene number. I said, why don't we just try this way? It was feeding her more and resting her. And boom, just 26 pounds off in like 16 weeks. And it was just like, holy shit, I didn't realize, dude. I'm like, it only works this way for so long before you got to go a different way. And I think that there's that. I'm looking forward to having this conversation today, B, because I think a lot of people, they think that they can keep working their carbs up to 500 or 600 or 7 or some obscene number before they think they're going to get fat. I'm like, it doesn't always work like that. So let's really tease this out today. So what is the definition of a reverse diet, and like when would you want to use it with a client?
Yeah, so a reverse diet is a strategic, calculated, and gradual method of intentionally increasing our calorie intake and our energy expenditure with the goal of finding our new post fat loss phase maintenance calorie intake. And it's really important to hit on that. What our maintenance calories after a diet are much different than what our maintenance calories were before the diet. And throughout this process, what we're trying to do is get back to that maintenance, find that new predicted maintenance, while also mitigating the excess fat gain so many usually experience during this time period. And when done correctly, reverse dieting provides a ton of benefits during the post diet time period. Reverse dieting can help increase our total daily energy expenditure or the amount of calories we burn per day, and helps to reverse the metabolic, hormonal, and mitochondrial efficiency adaptations that come from being in an energy deficit for a prolonged period of time. Now, this puts you in a better position and a more optimal state for your next goal specific phase, so that you can not only avoid the dreaded post diet fat regain and weight rebound, but you'll also be able to potentiate your future physique, performance, and health related goals. And the intention of going into a reverse diet is to mitigate the many physiological adaptations and psychological effects that come with being in a calorie deficit. As being in a deficit and losing a substantial amount of body fat and body weight often results in physiological effects such as a decrease in our energy expenditure, aka the amount of calories we burn per day, a significant drop in our NEAT levels, which we've covered numerous times on the podcast, a lower resting metabolic rate, a decrease in our hormone production, a skewing of our hunger signals. So we feel hungrier because we see a decrease in leptin and an increase in ghrelin, a loss of strength and a decrease in our training performance, as well as many experience disruptions in, our quality or our sleep quantity and sleep quality, which is something I really suffer from. But also we have to consider that we cannot separate physiology and psychology. So dieting just doesn't have, physiological effects. It also has psychological effects like an increase in food focus. And also, a lot of people experience a change in their mood state or their motivation levels. So we need to make sure we're transitioning after a diet to a phase that focuses on recovering both physiologically and psychologically after that dieting phase ends. And it's important to note that the first step of a reverse diet is to get back to a new state of energy balance, to start reversing the metabolic adaptations incurred during a diet, as we don't want to stay in a deficit any longer than we need to be. And also, we can't and shouldn't try to just eat less in perpetuity. So a lot of people, they think that they're just going to diet for the rest of their lives. And a lot of people, honestly, that's what they're doing. So we can't just diet year round and be in a deficit all the time, as that's an unsustainable approach to staying lean, and one that usually just results in someone eventually breaking. Honestly, like they can't take it from a mental or a physical perspective. And they go from being in a state of calorie restriction to calorie excess. And that's where, we see a lot of people, and this is why we have such a high diet recidivism rate, where they just say F it. They fall off completely and they eat anything and everything they want, which results in a massive regain in fat mass, which is something we see so commonly in those that chronically diet. And this is why after we finish a fat loss phase, we need to have an exit strategy in place, like a reverse diet, where we spend a period of time focusing on eating more, getting out of a calorie deficit, and reversing many of the diet-induced metabolic adaptations that were accumulated during the fat loss process. So the initial focus in order to accomplish this is to get out of the deficit in and of itself and define our new baseline maintenance level of calories, which will allow us to remain weight stable, or really the goal is really to maintain our body composition. So if you've gotten lifestyle lean, we're trying to maintain, the muscle that you've accumulated throughout the course of building phases in the past, and then also the fat loss that you've accomplished. And from there, we need to incrementally increase calories to help reduce the amount of metabolic suppression we've been experiencing, while also improving our ability to adhere to the diet, which is usually enhanced as our calories go up. And that's one of the number one things we see, that when people chronically diet, they fall off the wagon. So many times they're on the diet, off the diet, because their adherence is something that they struggle with. So we want to utilize this for multiple benefits. But the intention of using a strategic reverse diet is to focus on minimizing excess fat regain during this time period, because a mistake many make is to not have an exit strategy after they finish a fat loss phase. And what this ends up resulting in is a lot of people, they just discard the habits and behaviors they developed during their fat loss phase. And seeing as many don't have a plan and strategy in place, many end up overeating during this time and experience a body fat overshooting effect, which is, we've covered this in and of itself, like the phenomenon of body fat overshooting. So for anyone that's not familiar with that terminology, I suggest we did an entire hour-long podcast on what happens and why this happens. So I would suggest you guys go back to this. But, this is essentially where, after a diet, people regain all the body fat they lost and more, and they end up being in a worse place both physically and mentally after the diet than they were prior to beginning it.
So then what is the theory behind reverse dieting? Like, elaborate on that. Like, so, and what I mean by that is, everybody there for a while was no matter what the client you have, you feed them up. And then it was like, well, if you feed them up, you could really get them fat if you really didn't understand where they were at, or if they had digestion issues or hormonal imbalances. There's a lot to play there. So, in literature, what is the theory behind reverse dieting? And then what do you have to say about that for in the trenches? Because I think it serves more often than not. Most females do really well with reverse dieting. And most men, in my opinion, have done well with kind of like starting them at maintenance or what you think would be maintenance, and then kind of figure out how their body wants to respond from there. So I'm just curious to see.
I think it's important to note that there is no clinical trials on reverse dieting. So we don't have this in the literature, and there's multiple reasons as to why we don't. The first thing is that a lot of people, they struggle and they fail during the post diet weight maintenance phase, and so we don't have a lot of controlled trials where we can really take someone through that process. So I am going to cite some literature later on in the podcast, but this is going to be based on metabolic adaptation research, which is honestly our best collection or our best clinical evidence as to how to reverse metabolic adaptation, which is one of the main benefits as well as the main goals and focuses during the course of a reverse diet. But reverse dieting was honestly a phenomenon or a strategy that was developed in the trenches. And so this is something that actually comes from bodybuilding culture. And so obviously there's been derivations of it in different instances, but we really have to realize that this is a strategy. And when I utilize this strategy, and we can go through different clientele that this is best suited for, but it's someone that has finished a diet. So if someone just comes to you, there's certain coaches that just want to feed them up, but we also have to take into consideration other things. Like if someone comes to you with insulin resistance, are you really going to feed them up? Are you really going to incrementally increase their calories? That's only going to compound their insulin resistance. Yep. If someone has gut issues or gut dysbiosis, or they have SIBO, is increasing their carbohydrate content and the potential for them to have more fermentable carbohydrates that could, essentially exacerbate their symptoms of SIBO, their bloating, their gas, or indigestion. Would that really be a worthwhile method? No. So it's the right tool for the right job. So when we look at the theory of reverse dieting, remember, this isn't something that's proven in the literature, but the theory is based on metabolism. So a lot of people don't understand the physiology of metabolism, but I'm going to explain it so that people out there, they understand really what's going on. Because a lot of times there's a lot of myths behind reverse dieting, or people try to use it as this like magic trick, like, I'm going to make you eat more and you're going to lose weight. Like these are all myths, but essentially we have to look at the complex or the physiology of metabolism, really how it works. So our metabolisms are adaptive, and they're an adaptive and dynamic system that are responsive and adapt to what we give it and what we do, especially from a food and exercise perspective. So the theory behind reverse dieting centers around the concept of metabolic adaptation, which is something we've covered several times on the podcast. Now, most times when we've covered this, we've only done it in the context of being in an energy deficit, like what gets down regulated during the course of dieting for fat loss. However, we have to realize there's two sides of the energy balance equation and two sides of metabolic adaptation, or what's also said in the literature as adaptive thermogenesis. So when we eat less during a diet, our body and metabolism adapt in several ways. Our body loses fat, which is the physical adaptation we're aiming for, but at the same time, our metabolism adapts by down-regulating our energy expenditure. So we burn less calories per day as a way to conserve energy due to putting less energy in. Now, the thing is, just like our bodies and metabolisms adapt and respond to eating less, when we eat more, they adapt as well. So when we eat more, our body is able to adapt to training better. It builds muscle more efficiently. And our metabolism adapts by being less conservative with our energy expenditure, so we can burn more calories in everything we do due to having put more energy into the system, which we can now utilize and expend. So the theory of reverse dieting centers around the idea of eating more to get back to a state of energy balance, which upregulates our energy expenditure, as when we go from a deficit to maintenance calories, our bodies are more willing to spend and waste energy in the form of burning calories because we're providing them with more energy rather than continually restricting them of energy. This is because both sides of the energy balance equation are tied to one another, meaning as we change our calories in, our calories out changes as well. So as we incrementally increase the amount of calories we're taking in, our body will incrementally increase the energy we're expending out through things like increases in NEAT, increased energy expenditure during training, increases in our resting metabolic rate, and increases in the thermic effect of feeding. So these are all, physiological mechanisms that get upregulated during the process of reverse dieting because we're eating more calories or putting more calories into the system.
So then, with that being said, we kind of like you kind of gave a few examples. Who would reverse dieting benefit then? Like, like who's this best suited for? I think it's, like you said, context. Like if they're shooting out blood sugars, like 130, 140 upon waking or after every meal, then probably not reverse dieting. Or if they have gut health issues, things like that. I do find they do really, really well reverse dieting in regards to a lot of people who are coming out of maybe who were in like hardcore keto dieting, and you kind of move them into carbs, or say people who've been doing a lot of like boot camp classes and kind of like eating less and things like that, who didn't do it long enough to kind of get too much issues. So kind of what does literature say? I mean, obviously it talks nothing about reverse dieting, but then I guess it's all in the trenches. So with that being said, who have you found that reverse dieting best is suited for?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I think there's a wide variety and a multitude of clients that can benefit from reverse dieting for a variety of reasons. But generally, I kind of find that like three categories of clients that I work with benefit most. So the first category would be like those who have gotten lifestyle lean and to a sustainable level of body fat, and they want to maintain this lean physique that they've earned long term, but they aren't so lean that it'd be unhealthy to maintain this body composition. So this is where we can incrementally increase their calories, get them into maintenance, and be able to maintain that lean, healthy physique because they're not shredded like a bodybuilder, where it'd be unhealthy to stay here. Now, the second category of individuals that reverse dieting would be best suited for are those who have gotten lean and reached their goal physique, but they've had to do so by bringing their calories down to a level that wouldn't be sustainable long term. And this leaves them in a situation where they wouldn't be able to maintain what they've been doing currently. And they also have less room for error. So they've essentially incurred several metabolic adaptations through the course of the diet that they've used to get lean. So they're essentially, what that means is their energy expenditure is suppressed. So if they slip up and they just go back to the way they were eating previously, like when they exit the diet, they're going to easily go into a surplus, because remember, when your energy expenditure is down regulated, so are your maintenance calories. There's far less than they were previously. So if they just go back to doing what they were doing previously, they're going to go right back to where they were before that diet. So this is where I'd use a reverse diet to make the diet more sustainable for them so that they can actually adhere to it, but also so we can increase their total daily energy expenditure and provide them with a greater buffer for calories. And then the third client or category client that I think reverse dieting is best suited for are those who have a chronic history of dieting, where they've spent a significant period of time dieting, yet they still have more fat that they'd want to lose. So this could be the typical person that comes to you that still has a considerable amount of body fat, but says they've been dieting forever. And I find that a lot of the females that come to me are in this situation where they've went through multiple cycles of chronic dieting, where they've over restricted for as long as they could to lose weight, only to fall off and regain what they've lost. And the thing with these individuals is that they usually are on very low calories when they come to me. So they aren't in the position from a physical and mental perspective where continuing to diet would yield any favorable outcomes, because really we have such little calories to play with that there's barely anything for me to pull from. So these individuals, with these individuals, I'll use a reverse dieting phase as a way to reset, prime their bodies by getting them out of a deficit, and potentiate their ability to respond to a fat loss phase in the future. And with these type of individuals, I think reverse dieting is really beneficial as a way to gradually transition them into consistently eating more, which is something a lot of them, surprisingly have never done. So these are the type of people that they've the only time that they've eaten more is when they've slipped off their diet and had a binge, and they've eaten in excess. So it's never like they've consistently fueled themselves over a period of time where they've really put their body into a state where it feels safe. And I think it's important for anyone with a history of chronic dieting to realize that at some point you can't just eat less and exercise more. As if that approach hasn't worked for you, numerous times in the past, if you continue doing what you've done or what you've been doing, you're going to continue getting the results you've been getting, which a lot of people will say that they're unhappy with. So the fact is, a lot of times people will come to me and say, well, this is what I did. I did keto. And I'll say, all right, how did it go for you? Well, I lost weight. And I said, well, what happened after? well, I stopped doing keto and then I regained weight. All right. And then they want to do keto again. And I'm like, listen, we have to look at the root. You're only looking at a quick fix, and you're not looking at building the foundation. So if it didn't work for you because you reintroduced carbs and that was a trigger for you, then we can't just do this in perpetuity. We can't just keep utilizing the same, like looking at everything like a nail, like you're a hammer, you know what I mean? So really it's, the goal here is to get these type of individuals out of a deficit and into the habit of fueling and nourishing their bodies while limiting the body fat regain they've experienced in the past, so that they can be in a much better position to diet and lose body fat in the future. Because really what they've done up until this period is they've chronically dieted, then they've regained all the weight, and then they've reset themselves back time after time after time, because every time that they diet, they've gotten to a higher body weight and a body fat point than they have in the past. So every single diet becomes more and more difficult for them, and not only from a physical perspective but also from a mental perspective, because they feel like dieting has never worked for them. They've only seen short-term gains from all the effort that they've put in, and they also have this chronic, they're in the state of chronic mental restriction from the fact that they always feel like they're dieting and they're never seeing the results that they want. And it's really that it's not that they're not seeing results, they're just not seeing consistent results, nor are they maintaining them.
Can you reverse diet using keto? Like using fat to modulate the calorie increase instead of carbs? Like you were talking about triggers, right? And some people, when they eat carbs, they just go eat the whole pantry. In those situations, have you ever gone with a keto based approach or more of a fat based approach and raised the calories that way?
I have not. And the reason for that, it's factorial. Generally, when I have these conversations with those that have utilized keto in the past, I've asked them, do they see themselves abstaining from carbohydrates for forever? Like, is this an approach that they want to utilize forever? And they say no. A lot of their favorite foods are carb-based foods. And so I don't find that to be a long-term solution. And also from a reverse dieting perspective, we really have to think about a lot of the benefits that come to reverse dieting. And a lot of them come with increases in energy expenditure, which we see that increases in carbohydrates have a greater effect on energy expenditure than do fats. Also, we have to think from a training performance benefit. Our primary fuel source for anaerobic training is glucose. So it's a glucose dependent, activity. And so we want to fuel that activity. They're not going to get as many benefits from fat. And it's not that we can increase fat during the course of reverse diet. Obviously, I would get them to a baseline, but past a level that is good for hormonal balance, for the absorption of fat soluble vitamins and minerals, and for getting your essential fatty acid requirements, which are quite low, honestly, I wouldn't really see a benefit from doing a reverse diet from a ketogenic standpoint. And also, we have to consider the fact that we're trying to limit fat gain. And when we look at fat overfeeding studies, so increasing fat in the diet, that is the most lipogenic way that we can increase calories, because fat does not require anything else to become fat. So fat is, the dietary fat that we eat is the dietary fat we store on our ass. So we get the least amount of thermic effect from the feeding of fats. And so you're going to be most likely to have, when you increase calories from fat, to store that as adipose tissue. So that wouldn't be an approach that I would take personally.
I agree. I was just curious because you said the trigger thing, and you get some people who just be like, well, I'll just stay away from carbs forever. And I'm like, I don't know if that really works like long term, but okay. Because what usually happens is they, for example, like people who are in keto, like, I've just seen this, like gym members I'll talk to, they'll be in like a hardcore keto and they blow it on Thanksgiving and they just can't stop if they have like the stuffing. They eat the whole bowl of stuffing. And I'm like, oh man, poor guy.
And here's my thing. It's not that a dietary intervention can't work. It's just everything works until it doesn't. And I just see with keto, both in the research and then also in my personal practice, that it's not a sustainable approach long term. We generally see within ketogenic diets that for the first 2 to 3 months, there's results. And past 3 to 6 months, there is no sustainability, even in the most well-controlled trials. And so from a research perspective, we see that it's not a sustainable approach. And second, we have to consider that these macronutrients are, we can't look at macronutrients in isolation. So we have to consider the fact that we do not eat macros, we do not eat calories, we eat foods. So you're really going to abstain from so many nutrient dense food sources like fruits and vegetables and whole grains and things that have so many benefits from a nutrient density perspective, from a satiety perspective, from a fiber perspective. There are so many benefits that come from having a more balanced diet that includes carbohydrates, and not in such a limited threshold where you can't have beyond 30 to 50 grams of net carbs. And so I just don't see it as a long-term approach, especially in a reverse dieting perspective, because really we're not only trying to undo the physiological adaptations that someone has sustained during a diet, but also the psychological ramifications. So really, there are many roads that lead to Rome when it comes to fat loss. So there are many ways to induce an energy deficit. And one of those ways is a ketogenic diet. It's a simple, approach where you essentially eliminate one of the three macronutrients. So you eliminate carbs and you have a spontaneous reduction in calories for many people for a short period of time. But is that really going to be a long-term approach? Are you really going to be able to stay with that? And also from a mental perspective, are you really going to go without carbohydrates or really abstain from an entire macronutrient and food group that has so many benefits for the rest of your life? I just, a lot of people that have taken that approach, beyond those that have done so for a medical intervention like epilepsy, which I do see a lot of utility in it. I
Correct.
just don't, and we have to also think about the fact that when it comes to epilepsy, this is essentially a life-altering disorder. And so these people have much higher motivation. This isn't about body composition or, feeling better. It's about literally the function of their life. So they have a much higher motivation level to, eliminate carbohydrates and essentially run on ketones. And so I just don't see that being an approach that I would utilize, especially when we come to a reverse diet, which I'm generally going to use with a lifestyle client. So it's not going to be like this, super disciplined, regimented bodybuilder that is into rigid restriction. These are people that I'm really trying to increase the flexibility of their mindset when it comes to nutrition.
What then are the benefits of getting out of deficit eating more, since we just kind of talked about that?
Yeah, so there are a ton of physiological and psychological benefits we can get out of a properly executed reverse dieting phase when we get out of an energy deficit and eat more. So the first benefit is it can help to reverse the down regulations and our total daily energy expenditure that inherently come from being in an energy deficit. So when we get back to a state of energy balance, we'll generally see that all aspects of our energy expenditure increase as a result of eating more and having more energy in the system. So we'll be burning more calories per day because our thermic effect of feeding goes up. So seeing as we're eating more, this means that we have more food to process and we will be burning more calories through diet-induced thermogenesis, as our body requires us to burn calories to digest, absorb, and assimilate the nutrients we eat. We're going to see that our NEAT levels go up. So we have to consider the fact, like I mentioned previously, the body is adaptive. So just like our subconscious movements decrease when we decrease our calorie intake, most of us will naturally move more as a result of increasing our calorie intake during a reverse diet. Our exercise activity thermogenesis goes up. So by providing our bodies with more calories, we'll have more energy to put towards our training. And I generally will make, and this is something I was kind of mentioning with the keto, I'll generally make a large increase in my clients' carb intakes at the start of a reverse diet, which is especially helpful for fueling training and increasing their training performance, which will not only increase their energy expenditure during exercise, but also their ability to build muscle. And that in and of itself is going to increase their energy expenditure. So we also have to consider the fact that we're also able to stimulate muscle protein synthesis to a greater and higher degree at energy balance as compared to being in a deficit. So we actually see that when we go into an energy deficit, our rates of muscle protein synthesis drop, which is why it's really hard to build muscle in a deficit. So as we get back to energy balance, our rates of muscle protein synthesis are greater. And so this helps with building muscle, which is an energy intensive process in and of itself. But even just stimulating muscle protein synthesis is one of the reasons why protein has such a high thermic effect of feeding, as stimulating the synthesis and creation of new muscle protein requires a ton of energy. So seeing as all the components of our energy expenditure will increase during the reverse diet, this increase will help with the amount of calories that we're burning per day, which will also allow us to eat more and stay lean due to taking in more energy, which allows us to expend more energy. Now, the second benefit, the second main benefit that comes along with eating more during a reverse is it helps to mitigate the downregulation of metabolic rate. And I find that many worry about the damage that dieting can have on their metabolic rate, which is something we've covered on the show and something that a lot of people don't have to worry about. But we see in research that the downregulation in resting metabolic rate is temporary, meaning it's only significant when a person is actively in a deficit. So in a study by Martins and colleagues, they followed females who had lost a significant amount of weight during the post-diet period and found that within 4 weeks of finishing their actual active fat loss diet, so being an active deficit, their resting metabolic rate was no longer significantly suppressed due to getting back to a state of energy balance. So once they raised their calories back to maintenance, they saw that their resting metabolic rate basically was restored back to normal. So this is a huge benefit of going back to maintenance, and something that, one of the main benefits that we can leverage from utilizing a reverse diet. Another, big benefit is it helps us to avoid the rapid fat regain many experience after a fat loss phase, because a lot of individuals end up regaining most of, if not more fat after a diet than they did during the fat loss phase itself. And this only makes their next dieting phase more difficult and challenging, as now they'll have more body fat that they'll need to strip off on their next fat loss phase to get to their body composition goal. So by using a reverse diet, we can help to avoid this rapid fat regain and rebound. So, in practice, reverse dieting is something that I found to be extremely beneficial for those who have a history of chronic dieting, or yo-yo dieting essentially. And this is, especially because most of these individuals have went through multiple cycles where they've lost weight and regained it. And often they get into a pattern where they regain more body fat after each diet. So now at the start of every new dieting phase, they're starting at a place where they have more body fat to lose than they had during their last diet, which makes their next fat loss phase even more difficult than the last. So we really want to break this cycle essentially. And this is something that utilizing a strategic reverse diet can help put that client in a better position going forward. A reverse diet also provides us with a plan and a structure post diet, as well as goals and a sense of purpose, which a lot of people lose at the end of a diet. Like a lot of times during a diet in and of itself, people are able to stay focused because they're seeing changes in the scale, or they're seeing changes in the mirror. And it's a motivating process. But often, once that process is done, if they don't have a goal to shift to or a new phase to focus on, they really lose sight of the goal at hand. And that's why they're unable to maintain. So one of the main reasons why many fail to maintain the results they've achieved and the lean physique they desire is because they go from a period of dieting for fat loss, where they've been structured and focused, to not having any sort of plan for once the fat loss phase has ended. So by transitioning into a reverse diet, we still have a structure in place and objectives to hit, and it provides us with targets to hit and a new goal to work towards, which can be especially motivating and can really help a client focus on their future, on more than just a 12-week fat loss phase. I always say, we can make a lot of progress in 12 weeks, but I really want to see where you're at in 12 months. And it really is about not only about what you can do in a short period of time, like a fat loss phase, but can you maintain those results? It's not enough to just get them, because that's why we have a culture which is so heavy into dieting, because they constantly have to go back into the process because they lose the results that they've seen from the process itself. But if they focus more on that post-diet maintenance, they would be able to live a life of greater abundance rather than more restriction, especially from an energy perspective. And with that being said, it can, a reverse diet can also help improve our ability to adhere to our diet and hit our nutritional targets. So like, just think about it from a logical or logistical perspective. Like increasing food intake during a reverse diet can help bolster adherence, especially when someone is burnt out from dieting and from continuing to have to eat less. So this is especially true if someone has been on a diet and has been eating in a deficit during the week, but falling off on weekends, which has been negating their deficit. So what I've done with a lot of these individuals that come to me that say, listen, I'm good Monday through Friday, but I always call this the weekday dieter, and I talk about this on many podcasts that I do because I encounter this so commonly. They'll come to me and say, listen, my habits are dialed in when I'm distracted, when I'm busy at work, I'm good on the diet. When the weekend comes, I'm with my kids, or I'm with my husband, or I'm with my friends, and I just fall off and I never see the results. So they're essentially suffering from the negative adaptations of the diet. They're in this chronic restriction mindset, and they're also metabolically suppressed. So they've induced some metabolic adaptations from eating at such a deficit Monday through Friday. But then during the weekends, they're overeating so much that they're not seeing any fat loss results. So they're essentially getting the negatives of being in a deficit, but none of the positives or none of the physical benefits from it. So what I've done with a lot of these individuals is I've utilized a reverse diet where I've raised calories throughout the course of the week. And this has allowed them to not only better manage their hunger, but it's also made it so that it's easier for them to adhere to a more consistent nutrition plan. So this is really where I'll focus on their habits, their behaviors, maybe even their accuracy to tracking nutrition, because this is a lot of things. This is an issue that a lot of people suffer from.
And do you find
And
that a lot of people have a hard time using a food scale, like really understanding how to do it all, like weighing out cooked food versus non-cooked food and kind of understanding things like that? Like, how do you educate them on that from your coaching perspective? Because you said, kind of like sorting some of those nuances out. So I was curious, like how you work on that.
So in that specific instance, I don't find that. And maybe that's
Okay.
just due to the demographic that I work with. But from an educational perspective, I often find that I really have to educate them about the awareness around, especially food labels. and
Yep.
utilizing something like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer, which I prefer. But like I've mentioned to you, a lot of people don't like that interface. So I generally will educate them more so on MyFitnessPal. And really is about awareness. It's about letting them know, like, listen, it's not enough to just punch something into MyFitnessPal. It's about realizing that every time you eat something, it needs to be tracked. So for instance, a lot of times what I'll see is that people have inconsistent tracking habits. They'll wait till the end of the day. And we know that dietary recall, both in the literature and also from our own memory, is not that great. And so it's about increasing awareness. Hey, listen, if you're going to take a couple, a handful of almonds, just track that. Don't just eat something and then, often when we do something mindlessly, like we just grab food or we eat something off someone else's plate, we don't even think about it. We don't even register it. And there's actually literature that shows that eating mindlessly will actually negate the satiety response we get from that food. Now, couple that with the fact that often when we're grabbing handfuls of something or we're having hors d'oeuvres or, appetizers, like little finger foods, these are things that are hyperpalatable. They're energy dense, so they have a ton of calories with very little satiety. So they're not registering, they're not providing a satiety response, but they sure are packing a hell of a lot of calories. So it really is about increasing awareness to my clientele about this. And this is a great period because think about it like this. If someone is in an energy deficit, they're in a fat loss phase. Every time that they have chicken nuggets off their kid's plate, or they go and they have a scoop of peanut butter and don't track it, it is negating their deficit. But if we work up their calories, we get them more accurate, they're able to fuel themselves more. And often those little habits are not eliminated, but they're often reduced because they're feeling less hunger, they're feeling less cravings, they have more food in the system, they're more consistent, and they've also been educated, but they also don't have this pressure on them where they feel like they have to be in a deficit because they're now eating at maintenance. So they're in a better position, both physically and mentally. And so this is a really big benefit, both from a physical and a mental perspective. And then also from, just a increasing food perspective, more food also means, a greater opportunity to improve their micronutrient intake. And so by having a greater amount of calories to play with, as a coach, what I often look to do, I have a lot of people that come to me, and you were mentioning this previously, a lot of people with hormonal issues. And the first thing often people want to do is jump on HRT, which I'm not opposed to, but often I'm looking at their nutritional intake and it's dog shit. Their sleep is terrible. Their nutritional habits are piss poor. And so I really want to dial in the basics first. And what I've really found is, when I'm able to reverse diet a client who is hormonally downregulated as a result of being in a chronic deficit, that I really focus on getting in more nutrient dense food sources. And with that, we're able to provide them with a greater intake of micronutrients that can help with hormone production, especially when it comes to testosterone and thyroid. So a lot of people, I see with a lot of men that they are deficient in zinc, which is vital for testosterone production. Sometimes I have a lot of people that are, deficient in magnesium and chromium, which is very important for insulin sensitivity. And then from a thyroid perspective, a ton of people are deficient in iodine, zinc, selenium, and these are all important cofactors, which are necessary for not only the production of thyroid hormone, but also the conversion of T4 to T3. So by filling in these micronutrient gaps, we're able to not only mitigate the hormonal side effects that they're experiencing on their blood work, but also some of the lack of energy that they're feeling, or some of the downregulation in their drive, or some of these side effects, like women that come to me that are losing their hair or have brittle nails, or these signs of thyroid, function issues. Also, we got to think about it from the perspective, we're eating more now, so we're in a better state to build muscle. And really what I like to do is I like to utilize nutrient timing. So I'll try to put more of those calories to be allocated towards that peri-workout nutrition period, where they're able to fuel their training and their recovery, so that, we have greater training sessions in and of themselves, but they also have better recovery. And then also a huge benefit is just higher energy levels in general. So most just think of reverse dieting from a food perspective, but I think it's really important to realize that it's literally the process of increasing our energy intake, which provides us with extra energy to fuel all our physical and mental activities and responsibilities we have. So by eating more, we'll have more energy throughout the entire course of our days. So this extra energy is not only beneficial from a fueling perspective. I think that often as coaches, we really focus on training, we really focus on nutrition, but I really try to focus on lifestyle, because I often say that, it isn't just the 1 hour that we're in the gym, it's those other 23 hours. So, really, when we look at this, we have to realize that we're providing energy for day-to-day activities. So when I'm able to reverse diet a client, increase their energy, I'm able to have them have the more energy to do things with their loved ones, to take their kids to the park, to take their dog on more walks, clean and do things around the house. This is increasing their energy for all activities of life. And we know that our NEAT levels and steps are what contribute the most to our total daily energy expenditure. So by reversing reversing out of the deficit and eating more, you're literally fueling yourself to be able to burn more calories throughout the entirety of your day. It's also helping with greater flexibility and metabolic resilience. And, I'll tell you from a personal perspective, one of the best benefits I've seen with clients who have taken through a successful reverse dieting phase is it not only gives them greater flexibility in terms of the amount of food they can eat, but it also provides them with what I'd say like is greater metabolic resistance or resilience to higher calories. So by increasing calories and building muscle with a client who has, generally been under eating and under fueling themselves, I'm able to get them into a place where their maintenance calories are higher. So they have a much greater ability to handle higher calorie days. And this is especially noticeable when I have a client who goes on vacation and on their next check-in, they'll report that this is the first time they've went on a trip. And these are grown adults. So these are, decades of going on trips, but this is the first time in their life that they've went on a trip and they haven't gained a ton of body weight because now they've been in such a place where they're able to be more resilient to buffering these increases in calories because we've built up their intake. And so now they're able to have, more free meals in their plan. They're able to be a little bit more flexible with their food choices. Whereas when they were in this chronic state of energy restriction, they were metabolically adapted and they weren't able to. So every time that they ate off plan, it stuck to them. They saw rapid weight regain. Whereas now we've built up their maintenance calories. We've gotten them into a better place, both physically and mentally. And also, it usually, and this is something that's a little bit controversial. People will say that, reverse dieting will, this is a little bit of a myth. So I'm going to say the myth, but I'm also going to say the truth. And so the myth is that now you'll be able to always diet on higher calories. And that's not true. So if you are the same body weight, you're the same muscle mass, at the end of this reverse dieting phase, as you start at your last diet, you're going to have the same metabolism. Essentially, we can increase your energy expenditure, which is all those areas that are besides your resting metabolic rate. However, what I see is that reverse dieting usually can help you start your next diet on higher calories. That doesn't mean that your ending calories at the end of your next dieting phase will be higher than they were at your last dieting phase. But especially, if someone gets leaner than their last diet. But usually what I find is when I reverse diet a client successfully, they're able to start, be at a better starting point, both from a calorie, a consistency and habits perspective. So they're in a healthier spot, both physically and mentally than they were previous to their last diet. So I got them in a better position to start the diet, which generally leads to better consistency and better success throughout the entirety of the diet. And so they'll start on higher calories, doesn't mean they'll end on higher calories. And often that's not the case, because often when someone comes to me and they've already dieted previously, the next diet that I take them through after doing a primer phase or doing a reverse diet, we're getting significantly leaner than they've ever gotten in the past. So they're probably going to have to eat less calories. And that's just, a fact of the matter. And then from a psychological perspective, I really think it's important to hit on, getting out of the mindset of constant restriction, because, what I really find reverse dieting being helpful with, there's a bunch of physiological effects of getting back to maintenance calories, but I also think that we often overlook the psychological effect of constantly being in a state of restriction, both from an energy perspective, but also from a mental state. So, what I've really found is reverse dieting can help make a positive mental shift, especially for those who struggle with the concept of eating more. And what I'm really trying to do is get them out of a state of constant physical and mental restriction, both from a calorie and a mental perspective. And so reverse dieting can help us, ease these clients into the process of eating more. And I find this, this phase in and of itself to be especially helpful and really helpful for my female clients who have always been focused so much on eating less that they have a hard time wrapping their heads around the benefits of eating more. And it isn't until I walk them through the process of a reverse diet and I show them how many benefits there are of eating more in a strategic manner, rather than, continuing to only eat more when they fall off their diet or when they binge on a weekend, which they then overcompensate for by, excessively restricting after they binge, that now it's for the first time in their life, they're seeing benefits of eating more. And they're going against a lot of the nutritional dogma that they've heard, that women need to diet on this much of calories, or they need to, be this lean. And they really find, great utility in eating more, fueling their bodies, building muscle, resistance training, and really becoming stronger, more powerful women, both physically and mentally. So these are all benefits that I find to be extremely beneficial from a physical and a mental perspective, which is something that we can't overlook. Like, there's so much that goes beyond body composition progress, but this is a vital phase that I find that has so many benefits that are often overlooked.
What are the main reverse diet mistakes most dieters make, to wrap this up?
All right. So the first one's got to be, and this is something
raising food too fast.
and you're right. No, that is, and I'm going to explain it a little bit differently, but you're 100% on point. It is going it is raising calories too fast. But often when I speak to people that have done this, their reasoning or their excuse is they go back to their old pre-fat loss phase maintenance calories. And here's the thing, most people make the mistake of looking at their metabolism as this static thing and their maintenance calorie intake as this one set number, when in actuality, maintenance calories are a moving target. So when you finish a fat loss phase, you have undergone many, diet-induced metabolic adaptations, which means that the value that was once your maintenance calorie intake prior to dieting is no longer your maintenance intake any longer, which is why we have to find your new post-diet maintenance threshold. And what we have to realize is that dieting for fat loss is a really difficult process, but avoiding fat regain is just as difficult or even more difficult. And that's why we see that 95% of people experience weight regain after they finish their diet. So one of the main reasons why people experience such a rapid regain in body fat and body weight post-diet is because they simply misestimate the amount of calories they should be taking in after finishing a diet. And usually I see people do one of two things, both of which are mistakes, especially if maintaining your results are your goal. They either go back to their maintenance calories that they were maintaining their weight on prior to the diet, and they don't take into consideration, like think about it, if you were 200 pounds and you got to 150, you can't just go back to your maintenance intake from 200 pounds. Like that's, you're a lighter, leaner individual, your total daily energy expenditure is much lower. And what was previously your maintenance calories are now a massive surplus. Or this is another commonality, they'll use an online calorie calculator. So what they'll do is they'll go online, they'll look up their new body weight and what is the maintenance calorie intake for my body weight. And in both cases, you're way off your maintenance intake and you're actually putting yourself in a significant surplus, which in any circumstance would cause fat gain. So anytime we go into surplus, we have the predisposition to gain body fat, but especially when we finish a diet. So if you guys go back to the body fat overshooting effect episode, we covered why we are more predisposed to body fat gain post diet, and it's a combination of so many of these metabolic adaptations that we've sustained. And this is why it's so important to use biofeedback in your body's response to guide the adjustments you make in calories and the increases you make during a reverse, rather than looking to an online calorie calculator or to what you've done in the past, as that has no way to account for your dieting history or your current level of metabolic adaptation. Another thing, and this is actually a mistake that I see, and this kind of ties in with the last one. This is actually a mistake I see many coaches make. And what ends up happening is when a lot of coaches make this mistake or they put out the content that's based around this, it causes both their clients as well as those in the general population to make this mistake. And the mistake is I see a lot of people who believe that they have to get to a specific calorie target during a reverse. So a lot of times I'll hear individuals and coaches say that they need to get, to X amount of calories in a reverse diet. So for women, it might be 22,000 calories or 2,400 calories. They'll give this preset amount. And what's wrong with that and what's incorrect about that is that it completely disregards the inter-individual differences in metabolism, total daily energy expenditure, activity levels, and lifestyle between clients. And what we have to realize is just like for dieting, there's no magic number that is going to help every single person lose weight. There's also no magic number that will ensure recovery during a reverse for each client. So it's important to realize that reverse dieting is not about getting to a specific calorie target. And I often have people come to me that say that, the reverse diet didn't work. They weren't able to get to X amount of calories without gaining fat. Well, if you are 100 pounds, say a female comes to me and they said, well, I heard I had to get to 2,400 calories, but this woman's maintenance is 1,800 calories. She's on 600 calorie surplus. So she's gaining more than a pound a week of fat. And so you have to realize that maintenance is what maintains your current level of body composition. It isn't what maintains the average person's. And so we have to take a very individualized and context dependent approach to reverse dieting and realizing that you are not, what Instagram, infographic says you need to be. You need to take an individualized approach. Another thing, we're going to cover this, and this is both a mistake and a myth. There's a lot of people that will promote reverse dieting as a way to lose weight. So that, what does that cause? That causes people to expect to lose weight. So what we have to realize is a reverse diet is not a phase meant to lose weight. So although some, we do see this, and I've had clients that do this, some will hyper respond to reverse dieting and they'll see some weight loss at the beginning of a reverse dieting phase. The intention is body composition maintenance, not using a reverse diet to lose more weight. Because think about it, we're getting out of a deficit. So we should be getting back to maintenance calories. It should be maintaining your body composition. And with that, you have to realize that it isn't, we're looking to maintain our body composition, meaning our current level of body fat mass. We aren't looking to just maintain our body weight, because body weight fluctuates on due to a multitude of factors. So when we transition back to maintenance calories, it's important to realize that this is the calorie intake level that we can maintain our current level of body composition on. But this doesn't mean our scale weight won't go up. And by increasing our food intake and going up to maintenance calories, most of us will see an increase in our scale weight for a number of reasons. And this is something that often will freak a lot of my clients out. So I want to explain this. And I know a lot of people have experienced this. They think they're failing to reverse that because their scale weight's going up, despite the fact that they're at maintenance calories. And we really have to differentiate scale weight increases or scale weight fluctuations and body fat gain. So think about it from this perspective. When we increase our calories and we're consuming a higher amount of calories and thus more food, we're going to have a larger amount of food residue in our gut. So that's automatically going to add to our scale weight. And then also, when we increase our carbohydrate intake, we'll replenish our muscle glycogen stores. So that is stored carbohydrate in muscle that is not contributory to fat whatsoever. And what we have to realize is that for every gram of carbs that we store as glycogen, it brings along it brings along and stores about 3 to 4 grams of water with it. So say we increase our carbohydrates intake by 200 grams to get back to our maintenance calorie intake. That's 200 grams of increased scale weight just from the carbs themselves. And then another 800 grams of water. So that's 1 kilogram in total, which is an increase of 2.2 pounds of scale weight without any gain in body fats, as we've just went back to our maintenance calorie intake. Now, keep in mind, maintenance means no body fat gain. It is the maintenance of your body composition. And so those carbs were actually just stored as muscle glycogen, which actually, if you look at it, muscle glycogen is actually considered lean body mass. So you've actually gained some muscle, say, if you went on a DEXA, that wasn't body fat gain. So you have to realize, if you see weight increases, that isn't a negative thing. You have to look at your body composition. You have to look at your metrics. You have to look at your visuals and realize that scale weight isn't everything. It is not the be all end all metric. And you have to really be looking at your visuals and what you look like, what you feel like, and realizing that it's not all about the weight on the scale. And also, we even see in the literature that maintenance is defined by 1 to 3% of our weight. So we can fluctuate. If someone's 200 pounds, they could be between 200 and 206 pounds, and that's considered weight maintenance. So if you guys see a couple pound fluctuation the first few weeks of your reverse diet, don't fear about that. And then, last mistake that I really want to cover is reversing a lot of the habits and behaviors that serve someone during the fat loss phase itself. And the most common mistake is individuals become way too flexible and stop eating the same filling food sources in this phase. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll go right back to their old eating habits and reintroduce a ton of hyperpalatable energy dense food sources that aren't only energy dense and packed with calories, but they're also not filling. So this leads to them overeating, which is why so many people regain fat so quickly. So really what we want to do is, when you're transitioning into the reverse dieting phase, you want to avoid changing food quality and selection and variety too often. You don't want to go from filling high fiber, high protein foods to all of a sudden this if it fits your macros approach, where you're playing macro Tetris and trying to fit all these fun foods in that aren't satiating. You want to kind of stick with the majority of your meals based around satiating whole foods that made up your diet, but utilize them in higher quantities, because that's going to keep you, feeling fuller, and then also managing your hunger better. You also don't want to create this dichotomy between your diet and non-diet foods. So I really see this from a mental perspective, where people will exit the fat loss phase and automatically, when they're in their post-diet phase, they say, well, now I can eat everything in sight. I can eat all the non-diet foods that I haven't been having. So they're going out to eat all the time. They're no longer tracking. They're no longer, keeping up with the habits and behaviors. They're no longer tracking their steps or hitting their cardio. And so really realize that this isn't a reverse of everything that you've done. You're not undoing all the habits and behaviors. We're reversing out of the deficit. We are reversing you from being in a deficit and getting you back to maintenance. However, we're not reversing all the positive habits and behaviors that served you and allowed you to be successful during the fat loss phase itself, because that is why we have a diet recidivism rate. We don't have a weight loss issue. We have a weight loss maintenance issue. So really, when it comes down to it, maintain the habits and behaviors that served you well. Just focus on increasing food, feeling better, improving your biofeedback, and really getting into a state where you're fueling your training performance and feeling better both physically and mentally. And then you'll see the many positive benefits that come along with reverse dieting.
Dude, a solid one. I think we answered everything really well on this one.
Yes,
Ladies
sir.
and gentlemen, give me a round of applause on that one if you're listening. He put together a hell of an episode.
Appreciate that, my friend.
Where can everybody find you at, man?
Guys, feel free to reach out to me at Brandon_DeCruz_ on Instagram or on my email, which is bdecruzfitness@gmail.com. Also, guys, we would love a 5-star review. You guys can now review us on Spotify in addition to iTunes. We would love to not only get a review from you guys, but also feel free to share the show, like, subscribe, all those type of things. Everything that you guys do to support our show is much appreciated. We come back every single week on Fridays. We always look forward to answering your questions and providing you guys with a ton of value and insight.
Awesome, dude. Well, you have yourself a good day, man. I'll catch you later.
Sounds
Peace.
good.